Hey guys, this is the Gaming Beast, and I'm here to do a video response to Jeff Garrison, who I met at a Google Hangout room for the RPG Brigade, which is a really cool group that is, in a way, finding all the different RPG-related YouTube channels. And I'm gonna start to do more RPG-related tabletop role-playing game related videos, because it's something that is very close to my heart. Now, I have done in the past, but before I go into that, I'm just going to do the response here for Jeff Garrison, who I met and who seemed like a really cool dude. And yeah, basically he did a response which I'm responding to because I wanted to respond to him directly. And he said, how did you started with D&D? And that was a response to what was it? Puzzles and D&D. I might be wrong, that channel. And it was a 30-day RPG channel. I'm subscribed to him. I can't remember the name. I haven't written it down. But the point is to Jeff that I really liked your reply about how your grandmother bought you the monster manual, which I thought was interesting and in a way hilarious, because at least back in the day, I couldn't have imagined that. At least maybe my grandmother, she was into mythology and stuff, so who knows, maybe she would have kind of kicked out of that to a degree. But I mean, you've been doing this way longer than I have, but my introductory was a little bit different because I grew up in Germany, and I also have relatives in Hungary that we used to visit. And I think one of the first times I ever got in contact with role-playing games was actually on Christmas Eve back in '89, I think. It's been a long time. We got this board game. Me and my brother got this awesome board game, Hero Quest. And I mean, it was amazing. I mean, it's basically like the board is like a dungeon. It has rooms and everything, and you have a square like a tile, and you have miniatures with it. The unpainted miniatures, and basically it's a very trimmed down version of D&D, but it's more of a tabletop game where, you know, it's very, very basic. You have 4 or 5 different characters. Let me see. You have got the barbarian, you got the wizard, you got the dwarf, you got the elf, and yeah, that's it. But very basic, but the core, in a way, it introduces you to these concepts, you know. And the cool thing is you have the rooms, and the entire board is like it's a modular dungeon in a sense, because you have not only the miniatures, you have doors, you know, you have little plastic parts with little paper inserts that look like doors, and you can put them on the walls anywhere you like. And there is a campaign, a basic campaign, where there are maps where the dungeon is laid out for you, and there's a whole campaign and a story to it. It's made by Games Workshop, and it's set in the Warhammer Fantasy universe, but you don't really need to know much about it. That's the great thing about Warhammer to play this game, because this is a very simple dungeon crawl game. It has very basic stats, strength and intelligence and hit points, and for example, I think everybody starts with the same hit points, but the barbarian has the most hit points, like not hit points, strength, meaning 3 dice, which means the way how you fight is you have these special dice that have skulls, good shields, and bad shields on them. Now, every time a skull pops up when you attack, then you can add that to your attack score. And when you defend, when you parry, you need shields, you know. Now, for example, the barbarian starts with 3 dice for attack, for combat. That means every time he attacks and parries, he can throw 3 dice. The wizard is, of course, weak. He has only 1 dice, but he has spells for that instead of that. It's really cool. I'm not going to get too much into it, but it's really cool. It's simple. It's great for, you know, little kids to get introduced to fantasy, role-playing games, D&D, and the whole falafel, the whole shawarma, basically, of awesomeness. And And that's where I started. And the cool thing is we played the campaigns, of course, the mission, the quests, and we played it through when we got expansion packs. But we also, very early on, we made our own dungeons, you know, and we would sometimes, the cool thing was, in the booklet, and I don't have it here, but I want to do a review. Now, you might know this game because Angry Video Game Nerd did a weird review thing where you said, oh, it took too long to set up, but I don't know, I disagree with him totally, because this is an awesome game and it needs recognition. I mean, people know it's awesome, but Angry Video Game Nerd, he doesn't, it's like, oh, I cannot set it up in 2 seconds, that's why it's a shitty game. I was a little kid with no attention span, basically, and I loved this game. I loved setting it up. I loved building my own dungeon from scratch, and like, we had, there was these dungeon maps, and there was one that was empty, and it said, copy this and make your own dungeon. And we did so. We copied it, we made our own dungeons. After a while, we didn't even worry with the copying. We just made it out of straight. We knew everything basically of the game. We knew every card, because you could go into rooms, you could ask for treasure, you could ask for traps and secret doors, meaning if you would ask for treasure, then you could pull a treasure card, and you could get a treasure, but sometimes you would have a wandering monster or a trap, something negative. You could find gold, you could find a healing potion, you could find all kinds of stuff. And it introduced you to the very basics of what a role-playing game is, at least a fantasy role-playing game. And that's what gets you into it. And it's great because, you know, I used to be a English tutor, and I used to tutor, you know, young kids, and they wouldn't pay attention, you know, and I would take the D&D miniatures and I would make a game. Like, I would set up I would make an old square, and I would let them pick their miniatures, and I would say they could battle every time they knew a word, the correct word in English that they practiced, you know, and every time they would know a word, that would mean they did a good attack, you know, and instantly they were interested, you know, in the game. And it's an old game, but, you know, it's great to introducing young people, kids, to a role-playing game. Now, obviously they cannot be too young, but, you know, that's the awesomeness of Hero Quest, you know. And I mean, I was the same age as those kids, and I was fascinated. And we took this game, we took it to our relatives in Hungary, and we played it there, and we played it so much that it just fell apart. Like, I remember my brother gave it to my cousin or something, and it just went apart. Like, I know my younger cousin had still some of the miniatures, but it just was everywhere. And I was kind of sad, but then years later I rebought it somewhere in the mid-90s, but I got the Masters Edition which had a whole new epic level, kind of a Masters campaign, and where you could also hire now hirelings. They looked like German Landsknechte. They're like these mercenaries with the big swords, and like they were pikeneers, but some of them had two-handers, you know, like claymores, but they were the German type two-handers. And anyway, I can go on and on Hero Quest, but I don't want to bore you guys because this is an awesome game. So Jeff, this was the first thing that, it wasn't directly a role-playing game, but that's what got me into fantasy and the idea of a role-playing game, being a DM, because you have a DM already, a master as they call it, and it sounds kind of weird, but Meister it was in German, and you had you know, a storyline. There was, the basic quest was you had to go through all these missions, and then in the end you would fight the Witch Lord Morcar, and was it Morcar, I believe, and it was really cool. There was all kinds of monsters. There was orcs, and there was little you know, tables and chairs and treasure chests. It was really cool. If I'll have to get it, you know, it's right now in Hungary, in the basement, stashed away. It's one of the 2 board games I still have, and I love it. The other board game that really also continued that was Talisman. That was also from Games Workshop. Hero Quest was released by what is it, Milton Bradley here in Europe. I don't know who released it in America, but that really doesn't matter in the long run. It had TV ads. It was big, you know. It started a whole, you know, games like Descent today owe a lot to Hero Quest. Talisman is a similar game, but the difference was the scope was bigger. You had to wander a countryside. You had like 3 levels of you had an outer area, then you had an inner area. In every area there were sections, and you had to roll the dice and go one direction, and there was a bunch of different characters. That was more characters now, and now you could also level up. Like in Hero Quest you could gain gold and treasures and buy and weapons, but you couldn't actually level up, which is the one thing that stopped it from being a true role-playing game, even a simple one, and just was a very close tabletop, but it was a great introduction. Now in Talisman, you had again 2 stats, you had craft and strength, but this time you could also level up. Every time you would kill a monster, you would keep his monster card, and if they had either strength stat or craft stat, and if the stat was 7, or if the number of the monster cards added up to 7, then you could add a strength to your character, or a craft. And the way how combat worked was very easy. You threw, I think, you threw a dice, one 6-sided dice, and there was no crazy dice yet. Other than Hero Quest, you had the special dice, but they were also 6-sided. So you threw the 6-sided dice, normal one, then you added your strength or your craft, depending on what monster you were fighting, or a player that you were fighting, and then you added your strength or craft, and then the monster, you would roll for the monster the same way, and then you would compare, and if you had higher, you win. If the monster had higher, they win. If it was the same number, then it was a draw. If the monster wins, you lose a hit point. If you win, then the monster dies. It was simpler in a way, and it was always checked for the player. Now the players could fight against each other, but the basic idea was you had to go from the outer area to there was a inner area, and then there was the inside, the realm of challenge, or how it was called, and I can't think of it right now, but the point was you had to get the Crown of Command, but that was the end area, but you didn't want the game automatically. Like, you had to still defeat the other players, but once you had the Crown of Command, you could actually use a spell to defeat them with the Crown of Command until they get there, you know. And once they are in the Crown of Command, then you have to fight a normal fight. We had games that this game can last as long as, from a short game, from 4 to 5 hours to multiple days. I mean, this game can go on forever because you can literally just go around and round and literally grind in a way, because you have like a stack of adventure cards that is this tall, and there's a bunch of monsters and treasures and events and locations and NPCs and insane amount of stuff, and you can do all kinds of stuff. You can there's a spell where you can transform somebody into a toad, but it's called a random spell, so anything can happen. Well, not anything that is in there. You have to roll a dice and see what happens, and it's a cool game. And you know, some people might think, you know, it's not a, you know, some tabletop enthusiasts might think it's too simple, and they want a more complex game like Descent or something. Descent or something like those. But I'm like, I like Hero Quest and I like Talisman, and I'm always open to play new board games, but you never should forget where they come from. I'm not saying you have to play those if you think, you know, they're not, you know, not to your standards, but you have to still give them the respect. Now, I've been already talking way too long about this, and this is again a long video, and I wanted to keep it short. But yeah, you had Hero Quest, you had Talisman, and now you have Fighting Fantasy, which my cousin introduced to me. Like I was in Hungary, and he had these Fighting Fantasy books, these weird books that you didn't read from the beginning to end. You know, you would. It's basically choose your own adventure, but there's a difference. And there's other books like that. You made actually a character with stats, and you had to fight too, and also roll at certain stages. Also do skill challenges, you know, and you know, you started at 1, but then it said, you know, here's 2 ways. Do you want to enter the cave, or do you want to go to the castle and then go to 305 or go to 65? You know, and a lot of them would lead to doom, basically. But with Choose Your Own Adventure, it was just reading through the story and choosing a path. And that's the same with Fighting Fantasy, but you still have some chance, because you have to, for example, fight monsters, you know, and you can find items and stuff. So you would have to actually track your character. So it was a little bit more advanced, and it was a step towards to being a real RPG. Because even complex RPGs like D&D and GURPS, they have released similar game books, which how they are called. And there's a lot of other game books, but Fighting Fantasy is the one that was introduced to me and that helped me further my interest in that. And I could never get too far in them because I was a kid, but my cousin, he had a lot of them. He played them through. He even got one of the books. At the very end, he got the book for the world Titan, which is the world, the fantasy world where most of these fighting fantasy books are set in. There was a couple of oddball ones which were science fiction or post-apocalypse, which I always liked that they threw in something else. But most of them were in fantasy and set in the world Titan. And then there was later books called Advanced Fighting Fantasy, which were really interesting because they basically said, I didn't have them, but what I read about them was that they introduced a real role-playing system as like, okay, you have done these books, do you want to do the same thing, but now do it with your own adventures, you know, without reading through the book, making characters, having a DM, a proper role-playing game, basically moving from it was a role-playing game, but from the game book style, limited role-playing game to the role-playing game. Because now I have a hard time going back to these game books because it's always so limited, because it's always like, do you choose this path or this path, you know? Sometimes there's a third option, but it's like, And it also says a lot of times stuff that you do now, and then that's why you get into the situation. And I'm like, I don't like that anymore. I'm a little bit, maybe I'm too old for that, but I would still try that. Anyway, like Fighting Fantasy was made by Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson, and it was a good series. That was another thing that introduced me to that. Then after like Hero Quest, Talisman, and Fighting Fantasy, I got my first proper RPG, which is Das Schwarze Auge, which is a German RPG. Its English title is The Dark Eye. And it was a really cool fantasy RPG set in a very detailed world, a little bit low fantasy, meaning that not quite low fantasy, but there was magic, but it wasn't as, you know, there wasn't like wizards everywhere, you know, you could play definitely a wizard or like a witch and stuff. But magic in that system is a little bit harder because you have to throw. The basic roll is also with d20s mostly. They have a couple of other dice, but mostly it's d20s, and you have to roll under the target number. You have to roll I think you have to roll the target number or below. So a 1 is actually a critical hit there, and a 20 is a critical miss. And it took me a long time to get used to that in D&D. That's the other way around, because GURPS is similar. You have to roll under the target number. And but actually this game was based on D&D too. It's one of the oldest German role-playing games. It's not the oldest, because I think the oldest that is still active is Midgard. Anybody who is German and watching this will probably know this. And what else is there? Yeah, so The Dark Eye is a cool role-playing game. It's pretty big. There's a couple of video games that came out. You might know Drakensang, which came out recently. And there was also one before that, which is known as the Northland trilogy. And it's in America, it was known as Realms of Arcania. But the only thing that changed was the title. For some reason they found it necessary to change it to Realms of Arcania. They sounded more fantasy-ish. Although Arcania, since they called the entire world Arcania, doesn't make sense, because in the Dark Eye, sorry, I'm hearing sounds here. I'm going nuts. Anyway, in the Dark Eye you have the world is called Aventurian. So maybe in an English translation, Arcania. I don't know. Like, I'm pretty sure in the Dark Eye they just call it Aventuria in English, because Aventurian sounds it's kind of like. I think Aventur is like Latin for adventure, and then it's like Adventuria or something. But Aventuria in English sounds pretty cool. So, and they had a really cool map. Like, that's something I have to film too. I still have my Dark Eye stuff, not the original stuff that we had. We had 2nd edition, and then we had some 3rd edition stuff. But we played, I think we played mostly 2nd edition and some 3rd edition, as I said. And we played it with my brother for a long time, and he played it with a friend of his. And it was like, he was playing it with me, but with him he was playing seriously. Like, first, I remember they were playing, and my first memories of role-playing games was they were playing, and I was kind of, I was a little kid and I wanted attention, and I would always bug in and just annoy them, like a little brother does, and do all kind of, pranks and shit, and just annoyed them, and they wanted to be serious and fight orcs and goblins and dragons or whatever. Although I don't think we ever fought a dragon, because dragons are freaking ridiculous in the Dark Eye, just how they are in D&D, as they should be, and and I think we did fight a dragon, but it was the lowest dragon, which is it's kind of called a stink dragon, which is a dragon that lives in the swamp, and that's like the dragon you have the best chance of killing. It's like not the glorious battle at all, and it's kind of like almost a false dragon like they have in D&D. I don't even know if he's a true dragon, because the dragons in the Dark Eye are pretty cool. Like, my favorite is the Lindworm, which is named after the dragon. Like in Siegfried, the dragon was called the Lindworm, and the Lindworm was this majestic 3-headed beast, and it's very powerful. I never even fought it. I never even had it consider to. I never had a game when I was DMing where I had high enough level characters that could face a creature like that. Anyway, the Dark Eye was great. I played with my brother a lot. I was a player always, and I had a dwarf. I usually played a dwarf because I was a little kid, but I think I did play a Shelm, which is a magic user, but it's like a comedic magic user. It's like, I would call it a harlequin. That would be the best translation. They're basically, how in the European folklore, especially German folklore, a kobold, not the D&D small reptilian kobold, but the German kobold, is this mischievous fey creature that, they sometimes steal a child and replace it with a kobold child, and they raise that, and basically they made this whole class on this assumption that, okay, so they steal the child, but what happens to the child? And the Shelm is exactly that. He's a human raised by a kobold, and he has the magical abilities similar to a kobold, although not even close as powerful, because kobolds are in DSA, that's the short, or TDE, I usually would short it, but I just shorted for DSA. They are the in their monster manual, their bestiarium, they have the description of the kobold is very cool, because they say, for spells, they say they can use almost any spell they want, and you don't have to roll. And what they have in DSA is mana, which they call astral energy. So every time you cast a spell, you deduct points from your astral energy, which you can, of course, recover through sleep. And it was like that system. The Vancian magic system of D&D is cool and all, but it was very strange for me, because I was used to, you have astral energy like in a video game, but it's like, it's mana basically. And they're so powerful that you don't even have to worry about mana. But kobolds are not the typical enemies, because they're mischievous. They won't hurt you or kill you. The worst that they can do is if you pull on their beard, if you manage to catch one and pull on your beard, then you get 7 times 7 years of bad luck, which is like, I think 64 years of bad luck, if I'm still good at math at all. And it's kind of funny, because in the basic box, because you would get it in a box, it's like old school D&D, at least the version that I got, and there was a solo adventure that you could play Holy shit, this is like already 24 minutes, and I haven't even done the other... Anyway, this is long again. Anyway, point is, in that solo adventure, there was a solo adventure like a game book, and you know, you make your character and then you start with that for fun. It was really cool. I did play it through, but in the end you encounter a kobold, and I did manage to catch him, and I did pull on his beard, and apparently I got this bad luck. So if I wanted to be correct, I would have to always... I did play him with other DMs, and I would have to always tell him that. So this was The Dark Eye, and then after The Dark Eye, there was when I was a kid, there was a period where I didn't play role-playing games at all. And then there was video games like the NES, the Super Nintendo, and the PC. And then around high school, I felt kind of this nostalgia that, you know, I really liked that, and I was at Hungary at the time because I moved from Germany to Hungary, and I was in a dorm, in a student dorm, and I remember some people, they played the Hungarian role-playing game that was the major one, which is called Mágus, and I played that a little bit, and I also played a little bit of Shadowrun. It was good times, but I always wanted to play DSA, and I actually bought the basic box and some other ones too, because there was, for the basic modules, you always got a box with it. I'm going to show it one day once I got my hands back on my stuff, because I still have that, because my brother's D&D stuff, he like sold or gave away, I don't know, but the point is we didn't have it anymore. I'm really sad about that, but because we had a bunch of modules, I had great modules, a bunch of expansion books. Point is, I bought it again, and then I ran some games in the dorm, not too many though, and then I ran some games with my cousins and, you know, with some friends, but, you know, I couldn't get a regular game going, sadly. And I didn't get a regular game until I got to America in college, where I again picked up, I got GURPS, which I then played for the next several years when I was in college, and then I got into D&D. That's actually when the first time I knew about D&D, but that's when I really got into D&D, which was, first I played 3.5, then I played 4.0, and now I'm playing 3.5 again. And I played a little Microlight in between, and also Marvel Superheroes, and that's basically my whole history of my role-playing career, if you will. So this is for Jeff, and I really liked your video, and of course I made a super long video because I just wanted to make a 5-minute one, but I'm a rambly sort of guy. If you would listen, if you heard my podcast ever, it's never under 45 minutes. It's usually over an hour of me rambling on about nerdy shit. So that's how I got into role-playing games, and now I'm currently playing 3.5. I'm DMing 3.5 because I have been kind of cursed to being the DM forever, because nobody wants to be a DM, but everybody wants to play. Oh, that's not true. There's a couple of people who prefer to be a DM. But anyway, yeah. I'll just stop this video here because it's almost 30 minutes long, and it's going to be a bitch to render and get ready and blah 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 blah. But anyway, this is the Gaming Beast, and may the Death Mug of Doom be with you. And check out Jeff's, what is it? Jeff Garrison. Sorry that I don't know your name by head, but I'm gonna watch more of the RPG Brigade, and I'm gonna also leave replies like this, also in text and in video. And check out Jeff Garrison's stuff here. I never did this before, but now it's here, and it's gonna be also in the description. Or yeah, so. Check out his stuff, it's cool, and also check out the other RPG Brigade stuff. And yeah, talk to you later. May the Death Mug of Doom be with you.